Hello and welcome to the editing tutorial for the DC Mobile Film Pack. In this video, I will be walking you through some of my own personal iPhone photos and showing you how I edit them in Lightroom Mobile using the DC Film mobile presets. So inside the pack, you'll find 3 black and white presets, 3 expired colored presets, and 4 other presets that are more true to life and natural, closer to my other signature presets. Within those, you will see black and white classic, which is going to be more contrasty and straightforward with brighter highlights and darker shadows and still some grain to give it a filmy look. And then you'll have black and white expired, which has really crushed highlights and shadows and lots of grain, and then black and white soft with a little less contrast and some grain and less texture. And then you'll find the 3 expired presets with a lot of color grading and grain and some crushed highlights and shadows. Next, we have Fuji 1 and Fuji 2, and those are going to be a little bit more bright and that light and airy look. And then Kodak 1 and 2, which are similar but going to be a little more earthy with an emphasis on those green shadows and warmer greens and warm highlights. This pack is really stylistic and experimental, so it's all about personal preference depending on what you are going for and how you want that photo to look and feel. So if you want your photos to have a more classic, timeless edit, then I would lean towards the Kodak and Fuji presets. And if you want your photos to have that grainy, filmy look, then I would pick the expired presets. For this next one, I'll go ahead and walk through the different options again so you can see the variety. I think here my favorite one is Kodak 1, so we'll stick with that, and then I'll show you a couple tweaks that I might make to it. So something I like to do a lot, especially in desktop editing, is to mess around with the color mix or HSL section. So this is where you can adjust a lot of things like skin tone, or I like to adjust greens and blues in here. So skin, you're going to really find all your adjustments within the orange sliders. And you can see here, if I adjust the hue, it changes it from more red to more yellow tone. You can increase the saturation to give skin some more color or decrease it if it's looking too orange. If the skin looks muddy and dull, you can bring that luminance up or bring it down if the skin looks too bright or washed out. And then in this image, we have a lot of blue and aqua, so we can mess around with our blue slider just to see what type of look that gives. Film stocks tend to have a lot of blues and greens in them, and so it's fun to play around with those, especially when it's here in the shadows, to just give the photo a different look and pull out those blues. And then because we added some blue, I'm just going to warm the image up a tiny bit and maybe bring the vibrance up just to make the colors pop a little bit more. And then I'll bring the contrast up just a little bit. Okay, in this one, we'll just go through them quickly. And here I'm leaning more towards Kodak 1. I like the way that it's making the grass and the skin tones look, and I would probably leave it there, but I'll make a couple adjustments just to show you. Under effects, you can mess with the grain, which is something that's fun to do, especially with filmy looking photos. So bringing that grain up and just finding a combination you like between the 3 sliders in there. And then let's go into color grading. Color grading is also known as split toning, and this is a feature where you can add colors or hues to the highlights, midtones, and shadows. And within each section, you'll find a color wheel, and you can just drag your finger from the center to different colors around the wheel. And the closer you bring it to center, the less saturated that color is going to be applied. And the further you bring it out from the center, it's going to be a more intense saturation. I usually like to just play around with different combinations. Something I recommend is just finding a balance between contrasting colors in the highlights, midtones, and shadows, and between warm and cool tones. Doing this just creates a more balanced look to your image. Otherwise, if you're putting all of the hues in the same color family, it's going to end up essentially just changing your white balance, and you probably don't want just a wash of color over your entire image. Also keep in mind what in your image is falling within the highlights, midtones, and shadows, and think about the colors that you're applying and how those interact with those areas of your photo. There's really no right or wrong way to use this tool, so either play up what's already there, there's some color grading already built into these presets, or have fun messing around with different combinations because it can really give a unique and stylistic look to your photos. For this next image, we have those warmer highlights, and then we have the contrast of those cooler shadows. So I really want to play that up. If you study color theory at all, images are always more intriguing and pop more when we have the complements of different colors within an image. So when there's that balance of warm and cool, I always like to really lean into that. And you can do that with what preset you select, as well as through the color grading, like I mentioned before. So for this one, I'm going to select Kodak 2. It adds that cool tone to the shadows as well as the warm tones to the highlights, and then intensify that in my color grading. So in the shadows, because we already have those cool tones, I'm just going to play that up a little bit by bringing the shadow hues a little bit cooler, more towards the blue purple. I'll bring the midtones a little bit warmer, more towards the yellow, and then do the same thing for the highlights. And then to make it pop a little bit more, I'm just going to bring my whites up to make them more crisp and bright. And then to save some of the detail in the highlights, I'll bring my highlights down a little bit. And then I'll just bump the contrast up just a little bit to add some more definition between the highlights and shadows. All right, I'm just going to quickly click through all of these and figure out which one I like best. And here I think I'm going to go for expired 3. And then this is another situation where you can really use your HSL sliders to pull color certain directions. And here we have a lot of blue and yellow tones. So in this one, I'm just going to play around with the hues and find a blue and a yellow tone that I like that complements each other well and still looks natural. Okay, here we'll click through, and I'm leaning towards one of the expired colored ones here. I just like the filmy look that it's giving to the shadows and the way that it's making the greens pop. And this photo is a great example of what the different HSL and color mixing sliders do, because we have so many different colors within the image with the flowers. You can see how those hue sliders affect the colors of those. Okay, and then we'll just sort through all of these presets. Usually for portraits, especially ones with natural lighting and ones that are more classic and straightforward and not super moody and artistic, I tend to lean towards the more natural looking presets like the Fuji and Kodak ones. And then from there, there's really not much else I would do. I might mess around with HSL and just play around with skin tones a little bit, but I have it pretty close to how I would want it. So I will just adjust these orange sliders within HSL and leave it there. Okay, this landscape, I knew I wanted black and white, and I'm going to go for the classic black and white because it is already so foggy, so it doesn't have a lot of contrast on its own. And then I'm going to add some more contrast in there just by messing with the contrast slider as well as the shadows, blacks, whites, and highlights. This one I feel like could work really well as a black and white, but I also love the blue tones in it. And I'm leaning towards one of these expired ones because they just feel a little bit softer and moodier than the Fuji and Kodak ones. And because it's a softer photo, I'm just going to bring my contrast up. And doing that, I've lost a bit of detail in the shadows, so I'm just going to bring the shadows up, and I want to emphasize those blue tones, so I'm going to just bring my vibrance up a bit. This is another one that I feel like could go so many different directions, and a lot of times I'm usually trying to think of what I'm going to be using this photo for. For this, I'm just going with whatever feels best in the moment. So I'm just gonna pick one of these expired presets. I like the soft texture that it's giving the photo. And then I'm gonna show you how to adjust that texture more, and you'll find within the effects panel that you have texture, clarity, and dehaze. And on these expired presets, the texture and clarity is brought down already below 0. So you can really play that up and make it even softer and hazier by bringing those further down in the negative. Or you can add more clarity to your image and sharpness by bringing those to the right. So for this one, I would probably do black and white or one of these expired presets. You can see when there's a lot of green or darker tones in your image, the expired presets and even the Kodak presets will really pull out those green shadows. In this one, because we have that rich green backdrop, I want to select something that's going to play that up a little bit and then maybe mess with it just to fine tune things. And so I will go ahead and select this expired preset. And then just to tone down the green a little bit, I'm going to bring my tint over to the magenta to balance that out and then warm things up a little bit. I'm going to just increase the exposure slightly and bring my contrast up a bit because I already have that soft hazy look. I want things to pop a little bit more with the details and even bring up the dehaze a little bit to add some clarity to the overall image. And then I'll just fine tune some things like exposure and leave it there. All right, so there you have it. I hope that this tutorial was helpful in showing you the different film presets and how to use them on your images. Hopefully this gave you some inspiration for different edits you can use, and thank you so much for watching.